Attention entrepreneurs and global economy enthusiasts. What's happening between Canada and the United States could rewrite the rules of North American trade as we know it. In recent months, Canada has executed a series of strategic trade moves that have left American businesses completely stunned. This isn't just a temporary trade disagreement. We're witnessing what could be the biggest readjustment in economic relations between these two giants in decades. The repercussions are already shaking everything from Wall Street to Main Street, and the impact could extend far beyond North America's borders. Why should you pay attention? Because these changes will directly affect your wallet, your investments, and possibly even your next vacation. Stay until the end of the video because we'll unravel the 5 most shocking news stories transforming the continent's commercial landscape and reveal strategies to protect your interests amid this economic storm. Number 5. Tourism in crisis. Tourism, that trillion-dollar global industry, is experiencing an unexpected earthquake. Canada has implemented a masterful strategy that no one saw coming. They've launched aggressive tax incentives for their citizens to choose Mexico as a vacation destination instead of the United States. These incentives include tax deductions of up to $1, 200 Canadian dollars for families traveling to Mexican destinations, plus agreements with airlines that have reduced ticket prices by up to 35%. The Canadian government has also streamlined procedures for group travel and established safe tourism corridors in collaboration with the Mexican government. The results have been devastating for the American tourism industry. Hotel bookings in traditionally favorite destinations for Canadians have fallen an impressive 30% compared to the previous year. Morgan Stanley analysts estimate the direct impact on the U.S. economy could reach $3 billion in 2025 alone. Iconic destinations like Disneyland in California, Orlando theme parks, Miami beaches, and Las Vegas casinos are reporting a significant decrease in Canadian tourists. Small businesses in border cities like Buffalo, Detroit, and Seattle, which have historically depended on weekend Canadian tourism, are closing at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, south of the border, Mexico celebrates. Cancun and the Riviera Maya have recorded a 40% increase in Canadian visitors. Mexican Pacific destinations like Puerto Vallarta and Los Cabos have had to expand their hotel capacity to accommodate the flow of tourists from the north. The Mexican government has responded by expanding tourism security programs and improving infrastructure to solidify this new alliance. Tourism sector experts warn that this shift may not be temporary. Travel patterns tend to become ingrained, explains Dr. Maria Fernandez, a tourism economics specialist. Once Canadians discover they can get high-quality experiences at a lower cost in Mexico, it will be difficult to convince them to go back to paying premium prices in the United States. Number 4. The oil blow. If tourism represents a painful blow, what's happening in the energy sector could be considered a true strategic stab. Canada, traditionally the largest oil supplier to the United States, has begun to diversify its client portfolio in a way no one anticipated. The numbers are compelling. Canada has initiated negotiations to divert approximately 500,000 barrels of oil per day, which would normally flow to American refineries, toward Asian markets, primarily China. This volume represents approximately 15% of total Canadian oil exports to its southern neighbor. The implications are profound and multifaceted. J.P. Morgan analysts project that this reduction in supply could raise gasoline prices in the United States to $4.50 per gallon during the summer months when demand peaks. Refineries in states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, specifically designed to process Canadian crude oil, face significantly higher operating costs when having to adapt to alternative sources. U.S. energy security, a pillar of its foreign policy for decades, is compromised at a time of global uncertainty. Meanwhile, China has responded enthusiastically to this opportunity. They've offered long-term contracts with guaranteed prices, something Canadian oil companies find extremely attractive in a volatile market. They're investing in transportation infrastructure on the Canadian West Coast to facilitate these new trade flows. They've expressed interest in expanding energy collaboration beyond oil, including liquefied natural gas and renewable technologies. What we're witnessing is a geopolitical realignment with implications that go far beyond the price at the pump, warns Robert Chen, energy strategist at Global Resources Consulting. Canada is using its abundance of natural resources as a tool of international influence, and the United States seems to have completely underestimated this possibility. The impact on the U.S. economy could be severe. It's estimated that for every 10 cents increase in the price of a gallon of gasoline, American consumers collectively spend about $11 billion more per year. If current projections materialize, we're talking about hundreds of billions in purchasing power that will be diverted from discretionary spending to fuel expenditure. Number 3. Tariffs choking the automotive industry. The North American automotive sector, with its deeply integrated supply chains across borders, is experiencing unprecedented disruptions. It all started when the United States imposed 25% tariffs on various Canadian imports, including crucial automotive components. Canada's response has been anything but submissive. Instead of yielding to pressure, the Canadian government has implemented an incentive program for its domestic automotive industry, valued at $3.5 billion Canadian dollars. This program includes tax exemptions for manufacturers who maintain their production in Canada, subsidies for research and development of electric and autonomous vehicles, labor training programs for sector workers, tax credits for consumers who purchase Canadian-made vehicles. The consequences for American manufacturers have been devastating. Ford and General Motors have leaked internal reports projecting combined losses of up to $2.5 billion for 2025 if the situation persists. Prices for new vehicles in the U.S. market could increase between $3,000 and $5,000 per unit. According to the National Automobile Dealers Association, expansion plans at plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana have been frozen, putting thousands of well-paid jobs at risk. Auto parts companies in border states report drops in orders of up to 40%. Meanwhile, the Canadian automotive sector is experiencing an unexpected renaissance. Toyota has announced a $1.2 billion expansion of its Ontario plant. Electric vehicle STARTUPS like Lion Electric and NFI Group are expanding their operations. The province of Quebec is developing an ambitious battery valley to produce key components for electric vehicles. What we're seeing is a classic example of how trade wars can have unintended consequences, explains Professor Sarah Williams from the University of Michigan. The United States tried to protect its manufacturers, but has actually accelerated the development of a formidable competitor right across the border. The impact on American consumers will be significant, with higher prices, longer delivery times, and fewer options. Many are postponing new vehicle purchases. This, in turn, is aging the country's automotive fleet, with implications for road safety and environmental emissions. Number 2. Blow to the supermarket. Perhaps no aspect of this trade dispute will impact American households more directly than what's happening with food. Few consumers are aware that approximately 40% of fruits and vegetables imported to the United States come from Canada, especially during winter months. With the imposition of tariffs, this vital supply chain has been severely affected. The data is alarming. Supermarket chains like Kroger, Albertsons, and Walmart have already warned that staple products like apples, blueberries, tomatoes, and potatoes could increase between 10% and 15% in price. The availability of certain seasonal products could be reduced by up to 30% during winter months. Restaurants are adjusting their menus to compensate for the increase in ingredient costs, with the average price of meals away from home rising 8% in metropolitan areas. The timing couldn't be worse, with food inflation already pressuring American households. This additional blow is creating what some economists call middle-class food insecurity, a situation where even families with moderate incomes have to make significant compromises in their nutrition due to costs. Meanwhile, Canada has pivoted quickly. They've expanded trade agreements with the European Union and Japan to export their premium agricultural products. They're investing in greenhouse technology to extend their growing seasons, and increased production. They've implemented subsidies for their farmers to adopt more sustainable practices, positioning their products as premium options in international markets. American consumers are discovering, in the hardest way, how integrated their food chain is with Canada, notes Dr. James Peterson from the Food Policy Institute. And what's more worrying, this disruption is occurring at a time when climate change is already creating uncertainty in global agricultural production. In rural communities that depend on agriculture for export, the impact is even more severe. States like Washington, Maine, and Vermont, which traditionally sent a large part of their production to Canada, are seeing their farmers struggle to find alternative markets with comparable prices. Number 1. The alliance that could change everything. However, the most shocking and potentially transformative news is emerging from Europe. In a move that few analysts anticipated, Canada has initiated ministerial-level negotiations to substantially reorient its exports of critical raw materials toward the European Union. This ambitious plan includes establishing direct channels to export wood, critical minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, and oil to European markets, developing joint processing facilities in countries like Germany and France, creating a transatlantic trade corridor that would significantly reduce both Canada's and Europe's dependence on American intermediaries. The magnitude of this potential agreement is astonishing. Sources close to the negotiations suggest it could be worth more than $5 billion annually initially, with growth projections to $12 billion in 5 years. European nations have responded with almost unanimous enthusiasm. Germany sees Canada as a reliable partner to secure the critical minerals necessary for its electric vehicle industry and green technologies. France appreciates the Canadian approach to sustainability and high labor standards, aligned with European values. The United Kingdom, post-Brexit, is particularly eager to strengthen trade ties with Commonwealth nations like Canada. For the United States, the implications are profound and potentially irreversible. The traditional U.S. position as a global intermediary in the trade of raw materials would be seriously compromised. American companies that process and add value to Canadian raw materials before exporting them face an uncertain future. The geopolitical influence that comes with being a central trade hub would be significantly reduced. What we're witnessing is nothing less than a reconfiguration of the Western trade order, states Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a specialist in international trade relations. Canada is using this dispute with the United States as a catalyst to diversify its trade relationships in a way that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. Perhaps most significant is the implicit message this move sends. Canada is no longer willing to be dependent on a single market, no matter how large or close it may be. This new mindset could represent a permanent change in North American dynamics. How did we get to this point? To understand the magnitude of what's happening, we must examine the roots of this trade dispute. It all began with the unilateral imposition of tariffs by the United States, justified under the argument of national security, a justification that many Canadians considered insulting. Coming from their supposed closest ally, the U.S. administration expected these measures would pressure Canada to make concessions in other commercial areas. However, the political calculation severely underestimated two critical factors: the level of public indignation in Canada, where 78% of citizens support a firm response according to recent polls, Canada's growing confidence in its ability to diversify its trade relationships. In a multipolar world, the United States has operated under the assumption that Canada has no viable alternatives, explains Michael Thompson, a former Canadian trade negotiator. That assumption might have been valid in the 90s, but the world of 2025 offers many more options for an advanced, resource-rich economy like Canada's. The Canadian Prime Minister has repeatedly expressed that his country's preference would be to restore harmonious trade relations with the United States. However, he has also made it clear that Canada will not be a passive partner that simply accepts what is imposed on it. The impact of these trade tensions varies significantly by region in the United States. Northern border states Michigan, Maine, Washington, these areas are experiencing the most severe impact, with disruptions in integrated supply chains that have existed for decades. Small cities like Bellingham, Washington, where approximately 30% of retail sales came from Canadian shoppers, are seeing business closures at alarming rates. Energy-producing states Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, these states face a mixed outlook. On one hand, the reduction in Canadian oil imports could benefit domestic producers. However, refineries specialized in processing Canadian crude are struggling to adapt, resulting in job losses in the refining sector. Agricultural states California, Florida, Midwest, farmers who depended on exports to Canada are desperately seeking alternative markets. Meanwhile, consumers in these states are paying significantly higher prices for Canadian products that used to be affordable. What can we expect in the coming months? Experts are divided, but several potential scenarios emerge. Scenario 1. Quick resolution pressured by affected business interests. U.S. legislators could push for a quick resolution, eliminating tariffs in exchange for minor concessions from Canada. Estimated probability, 25%. Scenario 2. Prolongation and escalation. Tensions could intensify, with Canada implementing additional measures and the United States responding in kind. The scenario would cause substantial economic damage to both parties. Estimated probability, 40%. Scenario 3. New normal relations could stabilize at a new equilibrium, with Canada permanently maintaining a trade diversification strategy and the United States adjusting to this new reality. Estimated probability, 35%. What's clear is that even if a formal resolution is achieved, some consequences will be lasting. Trust, once broken, is difficult to fully restore, notes Professor Caroline Davis, a specialist in Canada-U.S. relations. Canada has discovered it has options and is unlikely to return to the previous relationship of dependence. Asterisk for entrepreneurs and executives observing this situation, there are several valuable lessons. 1. Diversification is resilience. Companies with diversified supply chains and markets are navigating this storm much better than those concentrated in a single market. Asterisk 2. Geopolitics matters. Even the smallest companies must consider geopolitical factors in their strategic planning. Asterisk 3. Agility as a competitive advantage. Organizations capable of pivoting quickly are seizing opportunities while others struggle to adapt. For relationships matter. Businesses with solid commercial relationships based on mutual trust are finding creative solutions to maintain trade despite obstacles. What we're witnessing is not simply another passing trade dispute. It's a turning point in the relationship between two nations that for generations have maintained the longest undefended border in the world and one of the most integrated trade relationships on the planet. The United States imposed tariffs to pressure Canada, but instead of yielding, the northern country is using this crisis as a catalyst for a long-range strategic transformation. The question is no longer whether Canada will return to its previous position, but how much ground the United States will have lost when the dust settles. For ordinary citizens on both sides of the border, the consequences are tangible: higher prices, reduced options, and in some cases, jobs at risk. But there are also opportunities for those agile enough to adapt to this new landscape. Could the United States be losing its trade dominance in its own neighborhood? The data suggests that a significant readjustment is underway, and as always happens in economics, once certain patterns change, it's extremely difficult to completely reverse them. What do you think? Do you believe this situation will be resolved soon, or are we facing a permanent change in North American trade relations? Leave your opinion in the comments, and if you found value in this analysis, help us share this information by liking and subscribing for more content on global economic trends that directly affect your financial future. See you in the next analysis.